Okay, this video is going to be about creating a parts list for an assembly drawing. And your assemblies you're working on in this class are relatively simple. Uh, this is this is one that I pulled out. It's not part of any class, but it'll give you a good representation of what we're going to be doing. And here is an exploded isometric drawing, which it kind of works the same as far as the parts list goes. Okay. But this is just to give you an idea of what an exploded isometric looks like. And I don't think we're doing those, right now. It's really more for the 11-13 class. That's where we'll get into those. But this is what I'm going to show you how to create. And you can just kind of watch through my video, and then your two drawings that you're working on this week, you'll be creating parts, an assembly drawing and parts list and stuff like that. Okay, so let me start me a new sheet here. So come on. New sheet. There we go. Okay, and of course your title block looks a little bit different. This is the one that I set up for the 1107 and the advanced classes. We're going to pull in a view. Sometimes it'll be an orthographic view. Sometimes it'll be an isometric view. But I'm going to pull in a view, and which one was it? I want the one that shows the nut. Well, yeah, let me do the one that shows the nut. That's the view I like right there. That's the view I like. And you set your scale, and I know that this one, use one of the preset scales most of the time. 1 to 1, 1.5, 1 to 4. This is a weird shaped object, so that's why I'm going with a weird scale. And most of our isometric views are going to be, we're going to do them solid shaded colors. And then we'll say most everything you're going to do, you're going to deal with primary model state. Okay, these are some rather advanced things that we're not getting into on these things. So we're just going to leave those alone. And make sure you do not have raster view checked, please. Please don't check that. Okay, and then we'll say okay. Now to make this fit on my sheet better, I'm going to rotate it. So I select it, right click, and I'm going to go rotate. And I'm going to give it a relative angle. I think 30 degrees. Yeah, 30 degrees works good. Okay, so now I've got my view that I'm going to work from here. The parts list, on the annotate tab, you come over here in your tables, and we're going to go parts list. And the first thing I have to do is select a view, because you may have multiple views on your sheet. So I select my view, and primary is what we're doing. These are grayed out because we only have one level. If we had sub-assemblies, and some of the more advanced projects you're going to do in 11-13 are going to have sub-assemblies. And if that happens, then this would be activated and you would have multiple levels down here. Direction to wrap the table, left, it's like justification, left or right. Okay, so we're just going to leave it like that. And we're going to say okay. And now it's easier. I mean, it's easier to snap this thing into place when you first place it, as opposed to after it's been placed and you try to move it around. Most of the time, the parts list is going to go right here above the title block. Because if you have a revision table goes up here in the top right corner. So most of the time parts list will go right here. Now let's look at the parts list. This is the default. You have item number, which is the item number over here, the quantity, the part number, and the description of it. Now how do you get these things? These come from the iProperties of the part. So let me open up part number 1. Okay, so here's the part file. And in File, iProperties, here is where you set those. Now, the name of the file is what you've saved it as. Okay, and in my advanced classes, we save everything by the exercise number from the book. Okay, so 1441 is the exercise in the book. -1, it's part number 1, as indicated in the book, or the handouts that you're working from. Okay, so everything gets named that way. And of course, IPT means it's a part file. If you have a drawing of this individual object, it would be 14.41-1, but the file type would be an IDW for a drawing. Okay, so let's look on the Summary tab. And here's where I put the title of it, Fork. Okay. And under Project, the part number right there, that by default, that comes through as the file you saved it as. Description, we put fork, the name of the part there, because this is what shows up in the parts list right here, the description, not the title. This is what shows up on the drawing. So you need to put it in both places. And if you're using the default title block from Inventor, here under Company, you need to put Chattahoochee Technical College so that it will populate in the title block. Okay, so that's where that information comes from. The parts number and the description. Now, let's look at editing the parts. So I select it and right click. I'm gonna go edit parts list. And so this is everything that's in here. These two items here, the fasteners, the set screw, and the jam nut, those come from the Content Center. And that's why they have a really weird part number and then a description. That comes directly from the Content Center. Okay, and most of the time, it depends on how your company is going to do things. You may have your own catalog of fasteners that you would use that would have a different part number or something like that. It just depends on how your company works as to how those things get dealt with. Okay, so now in the parts list, we can look right here, column chooser, and we can add or subtract items that we want in our parts list. Now, the way I like to do things here in our classes is that we always include material in the parts list. Okay, and that will come, so you can see it added it in here. These things come from when you assign a material to a part, when you're creating it, and it gives it the color and the texture and stuff like that. But a lot of these things, like this right here, the SAE 1040 heat treat, that's not a material in Inventor. So I added that in iProperties for that part, just like with the drop forge iron. So let's go, can I go back over here to my part? Yeah, let's go back to my part here and look at the iProperties. In physical, I applied cast iron to it, okay, but it's that is what I'm dealing with, right? Let me go back and look, make sure. Yeah, the fork, okay. Oh, because I've already done that over on the first page. That's why it's in there. All right, so let me go back in here to edit parts list. Column chooser, let's add material. Okay. Now these are showing up in blue because when I created the parts list over on the first drawing sheet, I added these in. And so it's highlighted in blue, so that's just in the drawing here in the parts list. It's not coming from the individual part in iProperties. Because a lot these kind of things are not a stock material in Inventor. Okay, so that's how you add or remove a column. Pretty simple. The next thing here, group settings. We don't have any groups. You could create groups and it would pull things together. I guess a way to consider that, it would be similar to a subassembly, or if you've ever looked at the exploded parts diagrams for a piece of machinery or something, and they want to group a whole bunch of individual parts together that you could purchase as a kit instead of each individual part. Okay. We'll say, for example, a small engine lawnmower or something, and you need parts for the carburetor. Well, you could purchase the individual gaskets and needles and springs and housings and things like that, and each one would have an individual part number, or you could group them together into what I like to call a subassembly, and then you could assign that subassembly a unique part number, and that way when you order things, you could order the whole kit or just the individual pieces that you want. But we're not going to be dealing with those in this class. The next one here is filter, and you can filter what's included in your parts list based on these items here. Okay, and some of these, like purchased items, that comes from iProperties. Balloons and item numbers, we're getting into those. So we're not doing a lot of filtering in this class anyway, so that's just there. You can resort the way that they're displayed. Maybe, right now they're sorted by item number, okay, which is, I believe that this is the order in which you place them in the assembly, is the way that it chooses that item number. I could sort it by part number, which is a much more reasonable way to do things, okay? So now everything is my part number, and that's a more logical way to do it. But now your item numbers are, out of whack. So what we can do is we can, what's that? That's export table layout. Okay, so we can go here, renumber items, and then that changed the way they are just here in the parts list. Okay, so that's kind of a logical way to do things. And in some of my examples that you're going to see, I may have done that, I may not have done that. Don't hold me to it. Okay, now you can also export this as an Excel file. Okay, and so that way you could, Excel or a text file, okay, or a CSV file, and you could bring those into a word processor to make a parts book, okay, for documentation. All right, so that's editing, how to edit your parts list. All right, now when I added that column, you notice that it dropped everything down. So it's always a good practice for your parts list for the information to be a single line if possible. So there's everything's on a single line. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag this out to make it the width of my title block, and I just got it close right there. Now I want to adjust the width. Well, I should have done that first. I want to adjust the width of this column. Okay, and now I'm going to adjust the width of this column, and it's hard to see, so can I pull it up? No, that pulled up the just the header. I'm reading through the title block there to get those right. Okay, now let's shorten these other two. Okay, and now I can grab the bottom handle and bring it up, and I'm going to try and match up that corner right there in my title block. Just got to zoom in on it a little bit. Okay, and now we can see we've got all of our data on single lines. And if you should happen to grab one and drag it inadvertently to adjust the row height on an individual one, so you can see that 6 is a little less than 5 and 7 is a little big, so I'm going to grab right there between 6 and 7, and you see it starts moving the whole thing down and moving the whole thing up. So it's kind of wonky on fixing those things. So I could pull 6 down just a little bit and grab that one and pull it up just a little bit, and then grab the whole thing and pull the whole thing down. Okay, what you're trying to do is you're trying to make them all look the same. Okay, so that's got the parts list. Now you can from within the parts list, you could select an individual item. We'll say the tie rod here, and if I double click it, it will open the part file. Okay, so that's a quick way to do that. So let me close those parts back down. That's pretty much the parts list. Now then, if I were to select it and go right click and go to bill of materials, and bill of materials is like the parts list. Okay, you've got 3 different tabs here. So model data is just that. It's just, pulling whatever was in the model. Structured would show if you had sub-assemblies, and we don't have any sub-assemblies in this. But it would show everything by sub-assembly. And then parts only is just that, just my parts, no assemblies. Okay, now you can deal with things here as far as renumbering and sorting and things like that. But the nice thing about this is you can export the bill of materials. You can save it, parts only. You've got some options there. You can export it as an XML file, and that's kind of weird. I'm going to cancel that, but the bill of materials there, it's a different report that you could run. Okay. Now, we need to apply balloons to this so that the item numbers are matching up with the parts. And with balloons, there's 2 different options. You've got manual and you've got auto. So I'm going to demonstrate auto, and I'll tell you, I don't like, generally I don't like auto because it's harder to control things. Okay, so the first thing is you select your view, and then you have to go through and pick what components you want to apply the balloons to. And so I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to start picking the parts. So I've got that part, I've got that part, I've got a little bitty set screw right there, I've got the rod. Come down here, I've got the yoke, a nut, and the pin. Okay, and so that's all of them. Now then, placement. So you've got 3 options here. Around kind of spaces them equally on all sides, and as you drag your mouse, it controls the spacing. And so if you just have to play with this. A lot of times I don't like the way it looks, the way it comes up. Okay, horizontal will do just that. It'll put all of your balloons in a horizontal line. Vertical, we'll put them all in a vertical line. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now, once they're in, you could drag them and move them around. Okay, on either of those. Now, the vertical, if you remember back on this first drawing, see the vertical works out really good for this orientation of drawing. So it kind of depends on what your drawing orientation is going to be. So let me undo those, and I'm going to do manual balloon. Um, and so let's look at our parts list. The fork down here is item number 1. So it doesn't matter where I start. So if I come up here and I select this one, I come out, and you'll see a lot of parts list uses like a shoulder, just like with a leader. So I left clicked once, and that gives me the corner, and then I drag out to the right. I left click again, and then I right click the mouse and go continue. Okay. And so to me, it just looks better as opposed to just having the balloon coming straight off of. Okay, and so you see I'm just going through and I'm picking each one. And just like with leaders in our drawings when we're dimensioning, they should not be horizontal and they should not be vertical. Okay, they should always be at an angle, typically between 30 and 60 degrees is what the normal way of doing things would be. And you notice you can get snaps on these things to help you line things up. Okay, and I need the pin or shaft, whatever it's called. Okay, and now I recommend once you get all your balloons in, whether you do it manually or or automatic, you should go through and check. And so here I've got number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, 5, and I'm missing part number 6. But looking at everything, it looks like I've got all of my parts. What you're not seeing is on the back side of this drawing over here, there's a little dowel. Okay, and the only way to do that is to put in another view so that it's visible. And the easiest way with this is to use a section view. And it's not something that we would normally do because in this orientation, a projected view would not work. An auxiliary view doesn't work. So a section is about all I can do. And so I'm just going to show you so that we get all of the parts list stuff in here. So I select my view. I place my cutting plane line outside here, but I'm going to make it parallel to the part. And then I right click continue, and then there's my view, and there's the little part I'm talking about right inside there. Okay, now I could leave that there. I can move it around. So I select it and I go right view, go to edit view, and on display options I uncheck align to base, and I'll say okay. Now I can select that and I can move it over here. Normally we don't move section views away from the cutting plane area, but sometimes we do. So it all depends on the part. And so now I can see it, but man, it's kind of hard to see in there. So let's take this one down. Let's make it not shaded. I think still kind of hard to see in there, but let's go back again and turn on tangent. Okay, I think that looks a little bit better. Um, let's change the scale on it. That might help. So let's go edit view, uncheck that, and let's make that quarter size. And you know, I could adjust my range. I'm trying to grab that little corner there. Okay. And so now I could let's make that an even bigger view. So let's make that a half size. I'm, I'm really, I'm really getting into things here with y'all. Um, and then I can drag that text up. So that looks good. Okay, now I just need to apply a balloon to that. And you know, we could have with the ISO view, we could have done that. We could have done a base view of the right side of the object. So let's go back over here and let's go balloon and select that pin. Okay, and so now I've got all 8 of my objects. Now when I say I could have done a base view of the right side of the object, and so come down here, let's turn, no, it would have been the left side of the object. There, okay. And I'll say okay. And so I just create that one base view, and there's my little part right in there. And so I could go through the whole thing of cropping this one. I could go crop. Okay, and then I could change the scale on it. Okay. I could, you know, same things I did before. I could change it to, you know, not shaded or whatever, but that's another way to get that view so that you can actually see what that is. The nice thing about this is you got an indicator showing where it goes. Okay, let's see. The balloons, I can move them if I want to. I can grab, you know, I could grab the handles for things. Once you've placed them, it gets a little difficult to get them lined back up right. Okay, it does get a little difficult. If this object were horizontal or vertical, we could line them up. Like say, I can select one. Um, where was it at? I thought I had. Let's see. So if I select multiple balloons, and then I can come down here and I can go align horizontal. And that gets the balloons lined up. It doesn't take care of all the little things, those shoulders and stuff. If I didn't have shoulders, it might work better. So you could select, well, let's select these two here and go align vertical. And all it's doing is it's lining up the circles of the balloon. Okay. Now, some of these things you will see, you get an arrowhead that points into the object. Sometimes it hits the edge of the object. Sometimes it hits a location that you really don't like. And it makes it difficult to change. Let's say we want to change that one. As long as you're still on the edge of that object, it's okay. But if you were to move off of that, it disassociates down here in your parts list. Okay, so that's let's pause now, and then we'll come back with another video.